Recording. All right. It's loading. All right, we're live.
All right, fantastic. Well, welcome everybody to the Michigan Music Alliance B-side session here. It is Monday, November 21st. We're a little bit ahead of 7 o'clock, but that's okay. It's good to see everybody's faces here. So my name is Nicholas James Thomasma, and it is my pleasure tonight to be the moderator for our B-side session on how to build your EPK. And first and foremost, the number one question, of course, is going to be, what is an EPK? And EPK stands for Electronic Press Kit. Okay, electronic, totally understand that. But what is a press kit, and what is a press kit for? And how do you use this to get gigs, which is kind of the main thing that all musicians seem to be most interested in, at least in terms of what we're going to be talking about tonight, is building your EPK. So we've got a fantastic team joining us tonight. In fact, we have quite a few members of the Michigan Music Alliance board here on hand tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody real quick. First up, a music journalist coming to us from the east side of the state. She's a freelance journalist and also the publisher of the Stratton set list. Hello, Lori Stratton. Welcome this evening. How are you doing?
Good. Hello, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Also, next up, another journalist here on the panel, the editor and publisher of Local Spins and also the president of the Michigan Music Alliance. I want to welcome John Sinkevics. How are you doing tonight, John?
Excellent. Very happy to be here.
I'm glad that you're here with us. Yet another journalist, seems like a common thread amongst the board tonight, is not only a journalist, but also an artist himself, and just recently an artist manager, thanks to Black Cat Management. Please welcome Sean Miller. Sean, how are you feeling tonight?
Good. How are you guys? How are you?
That's a good looking shirt you got there, bud.
I know. I had to go change,
Perfect. And rounding out the panel tonight is our executive director here at the Michigan Music Alliance. She is also a artist consultant at Crooked Tree Creative, amongst many other things here in the West Michigan music industry here. Please welcome Elle Lively. How are you feeling tonight, Elle?
Good. I'm happy to be talking about this because it seems like there have been so many questions with people getting everything ready for 2023.
That's right. That seems to be where we're at now. In fact, I'm seeing like festivals are already announcing their lineups. Tickets are on sale for events and next year. Like, it's go time, right?
Yeah, it's really I don't know about you guys, but it seems like everyone's summers are filling out already and things are really ramping up as we've seen less COVID concern than the last 3 years. So it's going to be a promising summer for everyone who wants to get out and see live music. But a lot of artists are taking the chance right now, while it's a little bit quieter, to redo their website, figure out their EPK, write new bios, and kind of clean everything up to go into the new year fresh.
Awesome. Well, I think we should just get right into it. As I said, EPK stands for Electronic Press Kit, but more specifically, what is a press kit? Lori, do you want to field this? What is a press kit? What's that for?
Yeah, sure. So I actually just want to say, when I first got press kits back in the day, it was like a folder, like a paper folder with glossy images and like a typed out bio and maybe like physical copies of music. I miss those days. We'll go with that. But to kind of transition to where we are at today with electronic press kits, to me, I really feel like it's an online statement of who you are. So I can only speak from a music journalist because I use them in that capacity, but I see them as a way to learn about who the artist is, what music they're releasing or have released, what types of photos they have that kind of capture the essence of who they are as part of their brand. and also look at things like, do they have one sheets available? Do they have links to social media? I feel like it's kind of a one-stop shop to go to a website or a downloadable folder like a Dropbox or something where people can go and learn all about an artist. And that's something that I always want to do when I'm ready to interview someone for my blog or another publication. It's like, where's their EPK? Where can I find all that stuff in one spot so I can study up before I do an interview?
John, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's a one-stop shopping sort of a spot. I would have to say that the thing that I run into in terms of the mistakes that some of the artists have made is that they're not keeping things updated. I think, every band, every artist either releases new material or changes the lineup of the band. And I think it's really important for artists who are putting out an EPK to make sure they're accurate with the information that they're giving the media, especially, but also even the venues and the bars that they might want to look at this material. It's really important to have good photos, high-res photos, horizontals and verticals that we can use, and they should reflect the band or the artist the way they are now, not 10 years ago. Same thing is true for some of the music that you might include links to. Make sure that it's the freshest thing you've got. I know it requires a lot of extra work, but I think as a musician or as an artist, and you're really trying to promote your material, I think it's really important for you to keep that stuff updated. I think you need to have a really succinct bio that also explains exactly what your band is about, the kind of music you play. I know a lot of artists are hesitant to sort of, be pigeonholed in a certain way, but it's very important for a venue and for the media to understand which genre you guys represent. Sometimes it might be difficult for you guys to put it into words, but I think if you throw out several genres, that's fine. I think it's just really important to understand that as a journalist and as a media outlet, as a radio station, as a venue, we need as much information as possible, and we need to have it in that spot because we don't want to have to start looking for it or start doing extra searches because we have a lot of other bands and a lot of other artists that are trying to get our attention too. And I think it's really important as well that you include like links to, your upcoming show schedule, even if it's on your website, just make sure that that's updated as well. That way we can get a better feel for where you're playing, what you're doing with your life and with your music. It's just really important to stay updated and also to provide the information in as direct a way as possible so that people know who they're dealing with.
Wow, that's fantastic. Also, I'm going to say that's a lot, right? There's a lot of things that you could have potentially in your EPK. But what is like the most basic stuff that you should have in your EPK? Sean, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I think John and Lori hit the nail on the head there. I think you should have a bio, explain who you are, what you're about, what your music is about. I'm looking at this thing and I saw you add, how do I know who I sound like? That might be a good thing to throw on there. We can come back to that question later, but that might be a good thing to put on there. I sound like X, Y, and Z for maybe a new market you haven't played yet, so people understand kind of who you are and what you're about. Good high-res photos, social media links. I think, I mean, Lori and John nailed it. So,
right, those are the basics of an EPK, right?
Yeah.
And who am I sending this to? Who would I typically send out my EPK to?
Is that for me? Okay. Well, as an artist, I mean, festivals, and we were just saying it's, now is the time to start hitting up festivals. Some have already announced. So when you're going to apply, I'll keep it Michigan centric. So, Bliss Fest, Buttermilk, Hoxeyville, Wheatland. When you're sending your stuff out, that's an important thing to have. It's a concise one spot, as we've said. Talent buyers, booking agents, venues, even if it's the bar down the road, it's helpful to have it so they can see it all in one concise place. So yeah, anytime you're trying to book a gig, it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, and I would say that even if you're just telling people to link to your website for more information, to make sure the EPK is always there on the website or even on Facebook page. I mean, there's room for putting a link in there for an EPK. you know, the faster, the easier you make it for people to be able to get access to your information. And, you know, radio stations, media outlets, publications, newspapers, wherever you're sending this thing, you know, they're going to want access to the photos and to the basic information, the background information, and where you're performing as easily as possible. So yeah, those are all places where you should be looking at, you know, making sure these people are aware of that EPK.
Excellent. I've heard photos mentioned. I mean, everybody said photos, right? That's a key element, essential part of an EPK. You're going to send it out. They want photos. Elle, you do a lot of photography and have in the past. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about it. What type of photos should I have in my EPK, and like how many?
Yeah, those are really essential because if you think about it, the EPK is the funnel of information where you have control over the narrative and what content is being used to represent you. If you don't have the most correct content in there, you're gonna have people fishing off the internet and find stuff that's old or not flattering or has maybe even isn't you. Done that before. And so it's really important to make sure that your photos are solid. And I know that this is something that musicians struggle with because sometimes there aren't always photos that are high quality that you can use. If you're going to invest in yourself, invest in high quality photos and do it regularly because this is how people are experiencing you before they meet you. So to make sure you're visible and it's not a cell phone photo is absolutely essential. And so with those, John mentioned doing vertical and horizontal. That's great for creating different types of promo materials. Make sure there's a lot of negative space too. Artistic photos are fantastic, but if you've got some room in the photo to add other graphics or information, that can be helpful for venues. And then also make sure that if you are touring with a band, you have at least one live performance photo. So it's not just you solo in all of the photos. Make sure you have a representation where they can kind of get a feel, especially for venues who might be using this for promotion. They can get a feel for what it looks like with a full room and a full band. So make sure you're presenting in all of the ways that you do perform. And with those photos, make sure you can download them as high res. If I have to copy and paste that off the internet, it's not going to look great. It's not going to be great. And also, if I have to screw around with permissions on a Dropbox or something, and you're not positive that that is open and accessible to the public, it should be open to everybody and able to be accessed. I'm going to go find another photo off your Facebook because I'm going. So if you want to use that photo, make it as easy as possible. Make sure it's as high quality as possible, and try to pick a minimum of 3 photos because something that works for something might not work for something else. So I always say like 3 to 5 photos. Make sure they're about, like half horizontal, half vertical, and you've got at least one that's really clean with some negative space.
Another important factor, include the photo credit. I think it's really important that the photographers get credit, number one, just because if they took a great photo of you, you want to make sure that people know who took it. But another thing is a lot of publications are very hesitant to use a photo unless they know that they've got the name of the photographer and it's approved. And if it's approved and they can use it and they're not going to get in trouble for using an unauthorized photo, it really helps to have that photo credit as well.
I'm going to add one more thing about that photo credit, because that's a great note, John. In your file name of your photo, if you're working with a venue who's doing a lot of stuff, put your name and the photographer's name in the image file name, because it's going to get lost as download poor and stuff like that. So especially if you're repeating usage at a venue, they'll have that on file and can use it again if they can find you.
Yeah, the worst thing is IMG 560 or DSC 5500. That is not going to work because I have thousands of those in my system. I need to know who's in the photo.
I'm sorry, I'm guilty of that, John.
I also want to mention back to Elle's point about high res photos. One thing that I find is I tend to get ones that are too high res. So if they're like 15 megabytes or something, it's really hard to work with those, and it's hard to put those on a website. They'll take too long to download. I have found roughly that photos that fit between 1 megabyte and 3 megabyte tend to work pretty well. Again, I'll defer to some like Elle and more of our photo experts here on that, but that's what I've found that works best when I publish them to my site.
That's great. That was one of my questions is what is a high res photo? Because I get that question and they say, I need a high res photo. And I said, all I have is these photos on my cell phone. So from in between 1 and 3 megabytes is the ideal size for, say, a journalist.
Yes.
If you're going to print, then you would want something that is significantly larger than that.
Yes.
You did mention something about using old photos too. And I think I'm going to specifically point out what is an old photo. If it is older than 1 year old, it's old. You do not look like that anymore. Stop using it, move on to the next thing, because you want to keep your representation fresh and make sure you actually look like yourself. And using photos that are like 5-6 years old, like go ahead and freshen it up.
The other issue with that is if the same photo is getting used by a zillion different publications and media outlets, it starts getting to look a little stale. And a lot of publications are going to go, I don't want to use it because I've seen it in several other places. It's nice to have a nice assortment of newer photos. And I know that can be a challenge for some bands to pull this together, but frankly, I think there's a way to do it. And I think if you keep it fresh and make sure that you have more than one option, it really helps the media outlets decide what to use.
Yeah, I suggest getting a new set of photos every time you do a release. It's kind of a good reminder to like release. You just automatically update your bio, make sure your links are updated, make sure your photos are updated. And I also suggest that, especially because we're in Michigan and the state does not look the same year round, you don't want photos in your EPK of you in a snowy woods. They're not going to use that in July, and they're not going to use you in a field in July or in January. So make sure you're updating with the seasons too.
That's all great information. And there are so many available photographers out there. So if you need band photos, that's definitely a service that is provided by lots of different places. And honestly, everybody has cell phone cameras. So at the very least, you can get yourself an updated headshot or an updated band photo, something for social media. But that is not going to replace the high res photos in your EPK. So I heard you say you need different photos for different seasons and then also at least once a year. So let me ask then, how often should I update my EPK? Sean, you want to take that one?
Sure. I think we kind of touched on that earlier. Anytime you have something new, you got to update, right? So like, for instance, if you win an award or, if you have a new single coming out or you have a new album coming out, or Elle mentioned, maybe you're touring with the band now, you got to, everything that you are updating as a musician or an artist, you should be updating concurrently with the EPK. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that, but that's my 2 cents.
Sure. Well, the thing about that, I don't like doing that. Is there like a service or something? Like, is there like a place that just makes your EPK for you?
Yeah, there are a few. If others want to, field this question too, but there's is it Reverb Nation? I think is one, and then is it Bandzoogle? I think is maybe the other one. And then if you're having trouble with that and you want a little more creative control over what you're doing, we haven't mentioned one sheets yet. I love one sheets, and canva.com is a great resource to make a free one sheet PDF. I've made dozens, and I will continue to use Canva until it no longer exists because it's that great of a tool.
And radio stations depend on one sheets almost exclusively. So if you're unfamiliar with it, maybe you go to that website that Sean suggested and take a look at some examples of one sheets, because there are some good ones out there. There are some that don't provide the information sometimes that a journalist might need necessarily, but I do think it's important to see what other artists are doing. And one of the things I've always told musicians is if you find another artist who you respect and you like the way they do what they do, and they're good at marketing, then try to emulate what they're doing, because they obviously have worked hard at this and know some of the ins and outs of the industry and how to promote themselves. And find the ones that are doing a good job with it, and especially if it's an artist you like, and then see what they're doing, and then you can learn from that. And even though you might not enjoy that part of the business, it's really important, I think, for an artist to spend time every week working on that part of the business. You have to work on your own marketing. You have to work on your own. It's your music. You have invested a lot of time and energy into creating this product that you want other people to appreciate. And I think you're the one who knows best how to express what it is that you're trying to tell these folks. So I think it's important. You got to set aside the time, and you may not always be easy. Everybody's got other jobs and other issues that they're doing, but I think you need to spend the time to really work on it. And one of the things I always point out is don't get cute. A lot of artists think they just sort of throw off these little like one-liners about their band, like how they're really cute, like, we're jokers on stage or something. That is not going to help someone who's trying to book a band or trying to write about a band. They need to know more about who you are, where you're from. That's another important part to include in EPK, by the way. Where are you from? Where are you based? As a writer, especially somebody that's really concentrating on Michigan music, I really want to know where you went to. I want to know where you were born. I want to know where you went to high school. I want to know where you went to college. But I definitely want to know where you're based now. And I hear people make mistakes like that all the time. They call a band from Traverse City when they're really not from Traverse City. They're from Grand Rapids now because they moved. Make sure people know where you're from, because that does affect the way in which they view what you are as a band. And be precise and try not to be too cute. It's good to be funny, and don't get me wrong, it's good to be clever, but don't get too cute in describing what the band does and the music that it creates.
Don't be cute. That's pretty solid advice right there. Unless you are cute, in which case be cute, because you're good at it. And so I will say also, for those folks who are out there watching the B-side sessions online, or perhaps have joined us here in Zoom, if you have questions, you are more than welcome to post them in the comments on Facebook or into the chat as well, and I will read those, and we can also spotlight folks if they have questions here in the Zoom room. But so far so good on the EPK discussion. I want to go back to this thing that you mentioned, Sean, which is Reverb Nation. And Reverb Nation, if you're not aware, is kind of like it is an EPK. It's like your online press kit. And another way of saying that is it's kind of like MySpace. How many people remember MySpace, right? And what happened to MySpace? So my next question is like, is Reverb Nation good enough? Is that going to be okay in the long haul? What do you think, John?
No, I don't believe so. There are, put it this way, if you're going to provide information about your band and you got you want people to listen to your music, Reverb Nation may be one of the last places that people are really going to go nowadays. Not that it's a bad place. Don't get me wrong. I think it should be in addition to other things that you're going to provide people. You're right. You have to keep on top of what is really used by a lot of folks, and Reverb Nation is kind of lower on the list these days. I would much prefer Bandcamp. If you're going to put your music up and you're going to provide information to people, that to me, they are very good with artists. They really treat artists well in general. They have these free days where you sort of take all the money and provide it to the artists when they sell stuff. I love Bandcamp. To me, it's a great resource. But yeah, I know you're right. Reverb Nation is falling into that MySpace territory in my view.
Go ahead, Lori.
I was just gonna say, to add to that, I actually prefer to see EPKs on people's own websites. I feel like that builds more credibility with them in terms of their music and identifying who they are and kind of sharing their experience. So yes, Reverb Nation's fine as a supplement, just as John mentioned, but if you can put it on your website or find a way to build it on there, I think that gives you more credibility as an artist. Go ahead. Sorry, Elle.
I was going to say the same thing. Normally, I assume the website is the most up-to-date source of information I have, because we don't know how old some things are. So I assume the website is probably the most up to date. And when I build websites or when I build EPKs, I build them right into the website. But it's important to know that that's not copying your about page. Our goals are different here. We want to be as clear, concise, simple, and clean as possible. It is a one-stop shop. You're grabbing like the essential items. So we already talked about bio, 3 to 5 really solid promotional photos. You also want to make sure you're including all the links, like Sean mentioned, like what's your most recent release, what's your most recent YouTube video, all of that good stuff. And it's okay to like bullet point some big things too, like where you're based out of. But as far as like hosting platforms, if I use Wix to build websites because it's really user friendly, and I find that I can do all of the dynamics I want. So I build EPKs right in there, and then I can send that out as a link. But I can also host on that EPK page if I wanted. I could host a PDF there. And with the PDF, I can make it clickable, and it can be the same thing I email out to radio promoters, venues, press outlets, and then also maybe what I'm sending out for gigs. The primary use I've had with EPKs from a venue standpoint is that's what I get sent once you're booked, and that's what I use to promote the show. So if you can do like, you do need to outline your genre. Like John said, it's okay to put a smorgasbord of whatever you want on there, but you got to give me something, because a lot of the people who are doing some of the admin work may not, like, if you're going to a bar or something, they might not stop and listen to your full EP to try to figure it out before they're putting it online. So you don't want to misrepresent or leave room for interpretation too much. Say what you are, make sure it's on there. So yeah, from the venue standpoint, like that is exactly what's going on the ticket link. So make sure it is updated, make sure it's correct. And if you're building one sheets, I build one sheets for each release. So if we've got a new radio single coming out, I'm going to do a one sheet that has nothing to do with venues or anything like that. It's for press and radio specifically. So I know I'm going to answer some of the questions that John already wants to know, like, where this artist is from, and maybe a little bit about the story behind the song and things like that. Things that I think are going to fit well into the narrative I want to craft. But primarily I've used like press kits after being booked. So sometimes I even put like a blank poster on there that the venue can download and write the date in, and the venue, all kinds of things like that. It's a toolkit that you're handing to promoters, basically.
One other thing too, I would highly recommend 2 versions of your bio. A longer version of the bio that if the media really needs it to be able to dig down into who you are, and then a really short, concise one that can be used for promotional purposes, because the venue isn't going to want to rewrite your bio. They're going to want to just use something really quick to sort of describe who you are and what makes you stand out. And when you do that, make sure you spell check. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had artists misspell their own names, for crying out loud. So you got to be very, if you expect other people to sort of respect you and do what you want, you got to make sure you're spelling things correctly. You spell check, make sure all the names are in line, make sure, like I say, your lineup is the most recent lineup, and also include contact information. I don't think we mentioned that. It's really important to include a phone number and a email address, because I don't want to, I will do chats with people on Facebook and that kind of thing, but I really need to have your email address if I want to follow up with some questions, or if I really need to get more information. So it's important to include that in your EPK as well.
You mentioned having a short and a long bio. Approximately how long should the short bio be, and how long should the long bio be? Lori, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So it can vary for people depending on their comfort level, but I tend to advise long bios to be about 300 to 500 words max. If you have a fairly involved narrative that you want to share, that's part of that. The shorter, the better, I would say. A short bio might be 100 to 200 words max. And then I also advocate doing what's called a 1-sentence bio. so that you can summarize who you are in one sentence, and venues and promoters could use that on social media or on the air or however that's used. It just is a quick way. So I advocate that as well.
Great. And it's been mentioned a few times now that your EPK would be hosted on your website. And I feel like there used to be this is like a hidden thing, and you had to have like the private link to know where it is. But do you recommend, Elle, that people put their EPK in a visible spot these days?
Yes, I do, because half the time, honestly, when I get the information from the talent buyer who got information from the booking agent might have kind of a half, old whatever about the artist on their website. So I can't use that. I'm going to go to the artist's website, and then I'm going to have a heck of a time finding the EPK if it's not made public. So I do recommend that, because especially if information is getting passed through more than you, like, make it as accessible as possible. Especially for press too. I'm sure like John has probably had to hunt some stuff down that he didn't want to.
Well, can you expand on that a little bit, John? What type of information are you looking for that you then have to go dig deeper for?
Well, it depends a little bit on the artist, obviously. I mean, for me, it's really important that, for instance, I haven't seen some bios, because people will rewrite their bios when they make a new release, like they put out a new album. And so the release is all about the album and includes almost no information about the artist. Well, if I'm pretty new to the artist and don't really know the background of this person, then that bio doesn't do me any good. So then I need to dig further and figure out, well, who is this person? Where are they from? How many albums have they put out? That kind of information. So, it's important to have, though, to me, it's important to at least have a nugget, a couple of graphs or a paragraph or two in every press release that you write for a new release. Include some background information about yourself. You can't always assume, I tell writers this too, you can't always assume that the reader knows everything about you already. You cannot assume that. You got to assume that the person who's reading this knows nothing about you. And so what are you going to tell them to make them more interested in what you have to offer? It's really important to make sure that kind of information is in your press release.
Great. So here's a question for you. I've got all this stuff, right? I got my press photos, and I got my bio, and I got my links, and I send it out to 100 booking agents, and I get no responses. What can I do to make my EPK stand out? Sean, do you want to take this one?
That's a good question.
I call on you, Sean, because you're an artist manager, and I know that this is a priority for you, is to make your artists stand out, right?
Yeah. I'm taking baby steps into that. For those that don't know, I am working on my master's in music business through Berkeley Online, and I'm trying to use this as my culminating project pitch, which is where Black Cat Management was kind of birthed. So right now I only have one client, and I'm just working as his booking agent. I haven't taken anyone on as a manager, but I mean, anything that we've really said, you got to have great photos. I mean, if you want to get flashy to like grab their attention quick, maybe have, a cute photo. I don't want to say cute, but something to grab their attention, and then have all the rest of the stuff that you need. Or put like major accomplishments up first. Maybe instead of, as we said in the short bio, like, I'll just use mine. I say something like, singer-songwriter Sean Miller, blah, blah, blah. I explain what I do. And it said, most recently, he's a 2021 Rocky Mountain Songwriting Contest finalist, right? So that kind of gets their attention. Like, oh, he's done something with his music, or something to highlight kind of the more bigger things that you've done. Maybe a big room you've played, maybe you've headlined Founders, or Midtown, Downtown GR, stuff like that. I don't know if from the press side, John or Lori, have anything else, but
I do.
Go for it.
I have lots of examples of really bad EPKs, and I have lots of examples of really great ones. And the ones that are really great to me, that really are like, oh, I'm going to save this one so that I can copy it later, or I can share this with someone else who might be into it. They're simple, they're clean, and they're simple. Like, I don't want a texturized background that I can't read the very light gray font. Don't get too crazy. It doesn't have to be a Microsoft Word doc by any means. Like, showcase your brand, but make sure you understand what your brand is. Make sure you're using no more than like 2 or 3 colors. Don't put too many photos on there. Keep it pretty simple and like concise. Because the ones that I like answer all of my questions as fast as I ask them. So like photo, bio, highlights, like links, put all of the important information at the top, and then the bottom, the people who are digging a little more, like Lori and John, who want to know more about your background, put some extra fun stuff down there.
What's the other fun stuff that we can put in our EPK?
As I mentioned before, like the poster that you can, like the venue could download this poster and throw it up and print it themselves. That's kind of fun. Sometimes I'll link like to old press releases about really cool things that we've done. Maybe there was a big benefit show and we want to highlight some press links and some photos from that, because it might be part of a backstory for something later. Sometimes I'll have list of venues played where they can click that hyperlink and like, oh yeah, here's all the gigs that they did in 2022. So really just any more additional information. Like, so we've got the essential things like the 1-line explanation quote, the short bio, the long bio, the photos, the links, and all of the stuff that John and Lori and Sean have mentioned to like stuff into that bio to make sure you're covering, where you're from, how many people are in your band, who they are, what genre you are, all of that stuff. But anything beyond that, I would say is extra. And as you kind of go through the different processes too, take note what talent buyers and venues are asking you for repeatedly. Take note when you get press feedback, like what they ask for, and add that to your EPK to make your life easier in the future.
One thing we didn't talk about, I personally like links to videos as well. And here once again is a critical thing, though. It has to be recent. And I know a lot of bands, a lot of artists don't necessarily update videos or put out videos regularly, but I think it's really important to have a fairly fresh video link that a artist, a venue, a manager, someone can take a look at real quickly to see how you perform on stage, or even if it's just a music video that you've spent a lot of time on. I personally like those. I don't think it's necessarily 100% obligation to put it in your EPK, but I do think it helps when you're adding fun stuff. I mean,
I saw in the chat too the word embed. There's another great source that's free online in town, and you can embed, well, you can put in all of your gigs, right, or all of your shows, and you could embed that into your EPK or website as well. I was just looking at Ben Travers' website, and he has it right on the bottom, so you can scroll, you see his about, you see his stuff, and then at the bottom is like, here's all of my shows. So then as a promoter or, a venue, you can say, or you can see, oh, well, Ben's playing here, here, and here. We can help, maybe route, give him a gig, help the route or whatever, or just to confirm, yes, he's played in this market before. So that's another great free tool as well. Bands in town.
Great, thanks for that, Sean. Bands in Town is a nice resource for bands, and it links up real well across the web. So, moving over to the Q&A, it looks like we've got a question from Michelle, and she wants to know that when you list your bandmates, how much information should you share about their story? Sweet and short, in other bands?
Yeah, I can take this one. I would say for bandmates, I'd say I say go on the shorter side, but like say for example, what instrument they play. That's one question I have is I'll get a list of band members that doesn't say what they play. And I'd like to know what they play, what their contribution is to the band. And is there a special relationship that the bandmates have amongst each other? Are they siblings? Did they go to college together? Did they grow up together? And then if they played in other bands, I'd say maybe ones that are more significant or maybe more well known. If it's a prominent band, I'd say yes. Or if it's one that's well known in the area, you could mention that they were a former member. Sometimes I know mentioning former bands can be a bit sticky and sensitive with other people. So that's kind of on a case by case basis, I'd say there.
Lori nailed it. I think it's important to obviously list the band members, the instruments they play. I do think it depends a little bit on, are you the front person for this band? And it's like, Julia and the Bangles or something, and the Bangles are just the Bangles. And so then it's fine to just list the instruments. But if you're a band that has a lot of members in it who really have been in other bands that have been fairly well known, I think it's important to put that in as well. I don't think it's necessary for all bands, but I do think it's something to keep in mind if you're like a super group and you've got band members who other people might recognize from other projects. I think it really helps. I think a lot of journalists and venues are going to say, hey, wait a minute, I know these guys. I think it's cool that they're playing with this person now. So it depends a little bit on how the band is structured, but you certainly have to include the band members' names and the instruments that they play.
The band that comes to mind is the Sweetwater Warblers, because that's, May Erlewine, Rachel Davis, Lindsay Liu. So like, I think that's a good example of one maybe you can have their expanded bios versus, just here's XYZ. I don't know, that just came to my mind.
Great. We've got another question coming in via Facebook. This one comes from Audrey Pearson, and she wants to know, what's the difference between an EPK and a one sheet? Elle, you talked a little bit about one sheets. You want to answer that one?
Yeah. So I want John and Lori to maybe to speak to radio on this in more depth, because I know that radio sheets are more specific, but an EPK is going to be like a live link, a living thing of some sort, usually like a hosted platform, your website or whatever it is. And then a one sheet is going to be a travelable PDF document that you can print out and it's still like legible and makes sense, but you can also email it and it's hyperlinked and all those links are live. And you can even host that one sheet on different parts of your website if you want. So you can really inception it in there. But with the one sheet, it's going to be like the shorter version of your EPK, like the greatest hits version. It's the one photo, the one line, just the short bio, and just like the bare, what are the most interesting things about you and your music, like right here in an 8x11, and it should be as sparse and clean as possible. Not like crazy amount of information, just enough to pique my interest so that I hit that hyperlink to read your full bio.
And for radio stations, people get one sheets because there's a new release coming out. So what you want to do is you list your album, the tracks on the album, and then you pick out the 2 or 3 radio clean, make sure that they're clean for radio, but 2 or 3 tracks that you want to highlight for radio. And I think it really helps to say, well, this one's up tempo, this one's, however you want to describe them, pick 2 or 3 tracks that you would really like to highlight on radio that you think radio should look at. And also list the times, obviously, how long the tracks are so that people understand that. But a lot of times these one sheets are really designed for every, like Elle pointed out, for every release you put out a little bit of separate one sheet. You might have the same basic information in terms of your bio information, but you're going to add information. The information that's going to change is going to be about that particular new release, the tracks that are on that album, and a picture of the cover of the CD or the EP or whatever.
I know it's hard a lot of musicians struggle with self-promotion because it's hard to talk about yourself. It's hard to talk about your art. And it's okay to bring someone else in to help you do that. There are so many great writers like in this chat right now, and so many and so like if you need help talking about yourself, don't be afraid to like ask for help and hire somebody to help get some of those things out and present them in a really packaged way as well. I know that's a struggle for updating bios and stuff, but once you have a good core too, you can always like move parts around and adjust it as well.
Another tip on that is if your band has ever gotten any press, personal example, I'm in a duo called The Real Ingredients, and we use John's album review through Local Spins for our bio because the way he described us is perfect. And it's like a 2-sentence chunk out of the whole review. And I use it for a lot of things actually. So and that's another free thing. So if you have a new thing coming out, submit to Local Spins to get your album reviewed. That's another thing you can add to the one sheet EPK. And yeah, you can use the press quotes too.
Yeah, I love that. And sometimes those are the great like one-line synopsises too. And I would encourage you with the one-line synopsises, with the bios, with anything that you're talking about yourself. Be specific, be extremely specific, be intentional, and keep asking, like, ask yourself why, because there are a lot of quote unquote like bad words to use when you're writing because they're just empty and they don't mean that much. You can get more specific, you can get more creative. And don't be afraid to like keep picking at something, because it's if you're just presenting it and it's not something that's unique. Like you could say, Midwestern grown guitar. You could say that about pretty much anybody in the Midwest who has a guitar. Like, tell me why you're unique and special. And that's kind of like just encouraging you to dig deeper a little bit and be really intentional about what words you're using and ask yourself why.
That's great advice. And I'm going to go ahead and give John a plug here because my guess is he wouldn't do this. It's fantastic to use quotes from John, but he also, we all know he has a great way of writing about bands, but he also provides that as a service that he writes band bios on the Local Spins website. So if you're not aware about that, you want the best bio in West Michigan, then you can reach out to John Sinkevics. And similarly, I'm sure that Lori also has some experience writing bios. As it's probably, as this is what this is one of the beautiful things about the Michigan Music Alliance is that we are here as a network to support each other. And so here we are thinking, man, I don't write a bio. I don't even know what to say about myself. And there are these services that are out there for musicians just like us. So just wanted to give you guys a plug for that if you do need help writing your bios, there's people out there to help you do that. And I know one thing that comes up, I get questioned, you get the gig or you're inquiring about the gig and they come back and they say, who do you sound like? And that's something that came up earlier, and I'd like to know, is there a good way to establish that? How do I know who I sound like?
People will tell you. First off, if you're playing out, I guarantee you're gonna have people come up to you and go, "You sound like," okay. They're not always gonna be right at all. Sometimes you'll be like, "Wow, all right, I'm sure I do right now." But you're gonna get people comparing you to a young this, or you sound like your piano playing sounds like that. So take those elements that people are telling you and create your own Monster Mash musician, because that's who you are. Take your influences, your biggest influences. If you listen to a lot of Coldplay, odds are you probably sound like Coldplay just a little bit somewhere in there. So really take a true assessment of who are your inspirations, what are you listening to the most, because what you're putting in, you're going to put out. So they're obviously inspiring you in some ways, and it's okay to acknowledge that. But also it's great to just put different elements together, because if you're trying to explain a genre and you're fitting in between some cracks and nooks and crannies, like use that to your advantage to really give a feel for what you're trying to give people. I was trying to describe my boyfriend the other day in a meeting, and I was like, he's like, if Tyler Childers and Humphreys McGee had a baby who listened to the Dead. And that's the best I got for that.
That's pretty spot on, though. That's pretty good for Austin. I was just going to add too, if you have a analytical mind, you can always, if your music's on Spotify, there's Spotify for Artists, which is a free tool for anyone that has music on Spotify. You can go in and see who your listeners also listen to. That's a good tip. And then as well as there's a free version of it. It's called chartmetric.com. And that has pretty much anyone in the world that has music. It's just a database, and you can compare and contrast whoever you want, however you want, down to what playlists they're on, their bios. I mean, it's an incredible tool. There is a paid version, but there is a free version too.
And to kind of add to what Sean's saying, one thing I like to see, whether it's on a one sheet or a bio or an EPK, is it might say for fans of. So like, not only do they sound like maybe a certain mishmash of artists, but like, are they also fans of Father John Misty and the National and like Taylor Swift or whoever, like, then when I'm going to interview someone, I know roughly where their influences or their interests might fall. And that's always an interesting tip for people to include too.
Yeah, I like that too. Although the older I get, the harder time I have trying to figure out what people sound like. I have to admit, I don't know what it is. Either that or like music is just becoming such a melange of different styles that it's really hard to pinpoint sometimes what people are like. But yeah, I do like that too. And I do think if you ask your fans, ask your friends, ask the friends who really know who you are, what they think, because quite often they're going to give you some interesting responses for what they think you sound like.
That's all great information too. So is there any difference, like let's say I'm not an original artist, maybe I'm in a cover band? As a question that's come in from Facebook, from Charlie Guerrero, is great stuff here, thanks a bunch. How can EPKs vary from an original band versus a cover band, and what would the differences in the EPKs look like? Is there a difference?
There is a difference. I think one of the things you really need to nail is every cover band has a roster of songs that they play by different artists. List those songs and those artists, and believe me, that will tell people exactly the kind of band that you are. I mean, some cover bands obviously are all over the board, but I think that really does help. I think that's the one difference I can see. And if some of your band members are in other projects, I think if for that kind of an EPK, I think that would be important to list as well.
I also just to use the Insiders as an example, because I think I did theirs, and I don't know who wrote this quote because they had it before me, but it says the premier Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers tribute experience. And then it says close your eyes and you won't know the difference. Open them and you still might be fooled. Because Max also does look a little bit like Tom Petty, but that's kind of a good synopsis, in my opinion, of like, that's what you want people to feel like. You want them to have all the same emotions that the songs that you're about to sing, or they originally had with them. So if you can present in a way that is really focused on energy and vibe and professionalism, like I would say in the EPK for like cover bands and stuff, they're probably hiring you because they want you to get a crowd going and they want to invoke some sort of emotion that is typical of the music you're playing. So if you can do more, like I would focus on a live performance video. I would showcase how great and how tight you guys are live playing the most famous Journey song, and have the crowd there, because that's probably, why they're hiring you, is to really bring the energy.
All right. Well, this has all been fantastic information. In fact, it's kind of made me like, there's been a couple times where I'm like, oh, I gotta go update my EPK now. And so I want to say thanks to everybody who has participated in the panel, everybody who has asked questions here. We're going to get ready to wrap things up here. And unless anybody has any more questions, you feel free to ask them now. But before we wrap things up, I think it's probably best that we just go over the basics one more time and just do a quick rundown of what is in an EPK. Sean, will you take this one?
Sure. So EPK, electronic or electric press kit. We talked about having a bio, maybe two different options, a short and a long. If you want to go all out, you can have the 1 or 2 sentence bio too, as Lori said. Some good high quality photos, both portrait and landscape, so vertical, horizontal. Maybe some accomplishments, awards, stuff like that, or press quotes. What else did we talk? There's so much we talked about.
What did he miss?
What did I miss? Oh, live performance video.
Lori, anything else?
Sure, I missed a few things.
I always think social media links are good to have. I know you can have your social sharing buttons on your website, but if you also put them on your EPK, that's always good to have too.
List of, I would think, discography. Obviously, you want to make sure that people know what you've released and when you've released it. The names of your band members, pretty highly prominent in terms of the instruments they play as well. And my biggest advice: don't get cute.
Anything else, Elle?
Info.
Great. Also see a comment comes in from Facebook from Callie Dempsey. I love the idea of a draft show poster, Elle. I also agree. I think that's a great thing to have a printable poster for them. And also, Callie says, accessibility and ease is the theme for tonight. And I would completely agree with that. As John says, don't get cute. This is a tool to get you booked. And in terms of tools, you don't buy tools because they're cute. You buy the tools that are the most effective for the job that you are doing. So if you are trying to get booked for a gig, you want your EPK to reflect your live performances. If you are trying to get press from a journalist, you want your EPK to reflect your latest release or your latest event or the thing that it is that you're doing. But either way, when it comes down to it, you want to keep it simple and keep it clean and keep it easy for people to find. So as we wrap things up tonight, I want to say once again, thanks to all of our panelists this evening: Sean Miller from Black Cat Management, Lori Stratton from the Stratton Set List, John Sinkevics from Local Spins, and Elle Lively from Crooked Tree Creative and the Michigan Music Alliance here. The Michigan Music Alliance is moving forward with some big things going into 2023. Some of them we're not going to talk about just yet, but there are definitely some announcements coming your way. And we are just getting ready to launch a Giving Tuesday fundraiser. So stay tuned for more information on the social media on that and ways that you can help. And I will say, if you are a musician in Michigan, we want to meet you. We would love to connect with you and hear about what you're doing. If you'd like to volunteer with us, that'd be fantastic. If you'd like to represent, the Michigan Music Alliance at an event, we're open to all kinds of things, and we're here to support you. So please feel free to reach out to any one of us here at the Michigan Music Alliance. And with that said, we've got another B-side session coming up for you next month. Elle, can you tell us about that?
Sure. We're going to be talking about radio, which is really exciting because here in West Michigan, we're lucky enough to have WYCE 88.1. And I'm really excited that we're going to have some panelists, not only from that station, but also from different backgrounds all over the state, and I think out of state as well, who they just have years between them of radio experience. And so we're going to go over the 101 of basically what is the role of radio now in the streaming environment that we're in, and how to submit for radio as an artist, some of the best practices for that. And they're going to explain how charts work, because those are so impactful for getting to gauge where you are in a market sometimes. So we're going to talk Radio 101 with those panelists, and we're super excited to have them. We've got Jeff Appleton, who's like a legendary radio promoter, and so many others. So yeah, definitely plan to watch that one live if you can, to ask questions.
All right, and that's the Michigan Music Alliance B-side session on radio is coming up on January 23rd. So before we go, does anybody else have anything that they wanted to add?
Nick, you did a fabulous job. Thanks so much for
Yes,
hosting
thanks.
tonight. It's been fun.
Definitely
Yes,
was
thank you.
not fishing for compliments, but I appreciate that, John. It has been fun, and I appreciate you all coming and hanging out with us for the B-side session. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in online, and for anybody who may find this information useful in the future. And we will see you in January for another episode of the B-side sessions.
See you guys.